if you would like to make a donation, there is information on how to make a donation to the Friends, because the Friends of the Ferguson Library under numerous programs, and I'm going to stop to mention just two of them because it is that time. One is our Books for Babies program. It was the first one in the nation, and it was adopted as a national. So every child born in Stanford Hospital received a book and a packet about the importance of reading. And the second one is open right now, is our literary content. It has been going for 35 years, and this is for all students, grade 3 and up. And children submit essays, fiction, poetry, and then there's a big award ceremony in the spring. But it is one of our most popular programs and one of our fullest ones here. And I just thought that to let you know that when you support the Friends, those are the types of special nuggets that you're supporting for the Stanford community. With that, I want to introduce Marilyn Allen, because these author series programs couldn't happen without the Friends Authors Committee, who puts together the slate of people. And Marilyn Allen will be moderating the program tonight. So Marilyn.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. We are delighted to have Aimee Molloy here tonight to talk about her riveting new book, Goodnight Beautiful. Her previous book, The Perfect Mother, was a New York Times bestseller. Aimee lives in Western Massachusetts with her family and her dogs, and she's lucky her husband took her kids out tonight, so we have her full attention. Kirkus had the best thing to say about you, Aimee, I thought. They call you the master of clever misdirection. It's such a perfect moniker for you. And your new book is a riveting, irresistible thriller about a newly married woman whose life is turned upside down when her husband goes missing. He's a handsome psychotherapist. She's the lonely wife. And in his home office, in the ceiling, is a vent. Would you listen if you could hear a psychotherapist talking to his clients down below? I know I would. That is the central plot twist in this fabulous new book. Welcome, welcome, Aimee. I just loved reading this. It was a great page turner and perfect in this pandemic. It just got my mind off of all the craziness.
Oh, wow. That's nice. Thank you.
Oh, yes. It was perfect anecdote. Tell us a little bit about your inspiration. How did you come up with this idea? What was your thinking?
Well, it's actually like it's a weird, funny story. But so the premise of the book, as you said, is there's a husband, and he's a therapist, and he works in a home office, and so there's this vent, and so the premise is that his wife comes upon this vent and like listens in on his sessions, and so my husband. Well, let me back up. So about 15 years ago, I was living in New York. And I decided that I wanted to see a therapist, which was something I had like no idea how to do. Like I was raised Irish Catholic. Like you don't go and see therapists.
That's my background too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
get over yourself.
Yeah. Just just go out, like, have a Budweiser, you'll feel better. And so I went to the one person I knew who could help me, whose name was Mark, and he's a therapist himself. And I was like, how do you find a therapist? And he said, well, you should go to my therapist because she's amazing. And so I did. I called her and I went to talk to her, and I was like, is it weird that this mutual, like my sort of friend who I barely know recommended you, like you're going to see both of us. And, I said, I don't have a problem with it. He's never going to come up in therapy. And so she says, no, it's a problem. So I see her for something like 7 years, and 7 years later, I develop a crush on Mark, who is still also seeing this therapist. And so I had this idea that I was going to like hide in the bathroom at the end of like one of my sessions and just like stay there for like 4 days until he showed up for his appointment, so that I could eavesdrop on it and like hear if he liked me. And so I didn't, much to my credit, I did not do that. But so it ended up, he did like me. And then we started dating, and I told him the story that this was like my grand scheme, that I was going to try and eavesdrop on his therapy sessions. And so at the time I wasn't writing fiction, I was writing nonfiction, which was my career before this. But we sort of, talked about that would be a really funny novel. And like, how, what would you do with that? And then fast forward 15 years later, we're now married with 2 children. And, and after like The Perfect Mother came out, and I was thinking about some ideas, I was like, this one had kind of stayed with me forever. And I was like, maybe there's something there. And so that was sort of the premise of the idea. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love that your actual life story is sort of the inspiration for this. But I think I read somewhere, Aimee, that you were ready to turn in the manuscript or near done, and you had like a change of heart and you redid the whole thing. What the heck was that all about?
Ugh, it was, yeah. I when my debut came out, The Perfect Mother, I sort of started to write something pretty quickly, and I had this idea, and the premise is the same. And I took it to my publisher when I had 100 pages written, and they liked it and they bought it. And then I had like a year or something to finish it. And then right before it was done, like literally like 3 weeks before it was finished, like it wasn't gelling, and it just didn't feel like it was the book that I wanted to write. And, like the premise was like this wife who couldn't be trusted, and she was crazy. And Me Too was happening at the time. And I was actually like having a hard time kind of writing this character, like another woman who shouldn't be believed for what she was saying. And so I think it was both like a combination of it not really working, but then also this character came into my head. And this is a very hard book to talk about because there are some sort of major twists in it. But one of the characters in the book kind of popped into my head, and I was like, oh, this would be an interesting way to tell the story is through this character. But it meant that sort of every character had to change. And so I went to my agent first, and I was like, I don't like, what hypothetically is the process if like you've sold a book and it's almost due, and there's like a cover and a publication date, and you decide that you want to throw it away and start over. And I have to say, everybody, once I pitched the new idea to everybody, everybody agreed that it would be a better book. And so, my editor and my publisher, they gave me the extra time to do it. So I kind of like wrote 2 books to get to this one, which I don't recommend.
Well, the end result is worth it. It's really a fun read. And I think it went through a lot of chaos, but in the end, it worked out. When I worked at Penguin, I was actually marketing director for Stephen King.
Oh, wow.
And our main character is, you go spoiler alert if I'm getting too close. I'm trying to be careful and not ruin the surprise. So our main character, Sam, is reading Misery, and then his life kind of follows a little bit of what happened in Misery. Are you a Stephen King fan, and what made you?
I am. If you still know him, if you could send him the book, that would be amazing. But no, I am this book is really an homage to Misery. I think in many ways. And he's one of the people who really, I think, made me a reader, which then made me a writer, but from a young age, I was kind of devouring adult books pretty early. And it was largely due to him. And so, so in the book, Sam, the main character, is reading Misery, and it turns out that his wife is actually teaching Misery in a class that she teaches. And so there's a lot of nods to Stephen King. And so I did actually send him a book with like, my agent called me and said, okay, I have his address. We're going to send him a book. Like, can you write him a letter and, send it to me by noon? And I was like, can I write a letter to Stephen King by noon? Like, no, like I need to walk for like 2 weeks and just think about it. So I did like end up writing him this letter. And as soon as I sent it, I was like, oh shoot, I should have said something else. But so yeah, I'm still hoping it gets into his hands. So.
Well, hopefully he'll open that envelope and be in touch. Maybe, I hope, Stephen King, if you're out there, send us a question, send us a sign. Now, Sam, the psychotherapist, gets caught in a bad predicament, and he kind of uses his skills as psychotherapy to get himself out of it.
Yeah.
Did you research that? Tell us about that process. Obviously, you said you went through your own therapy, so I'm sure you learned some techniques.
Well, it helps that my husband was really like, I would just, send him these questions during the day. And I'm just like, okay, if this is, what somebody's talking about, like, what is the diagnosis of it? And, and also strangely, for some reason, like I have like 4 very good friends who are also therapists. And so they were kind enough we had a couple nights where we got together and we like had a bunch of open some wine. And I was like, here's this character, help me to like, let's do a whole psychological profile of every single one of them. Like there's basically ends up being 3 main characters in the book. And so they helped me a lot with like the psychological profile and, what is their childhood like, even though that might not ever hit the page, but, really trying to deeply understand that. And yeah, so sometimes
That's why
it's
it
not
felt
just
so
a-
real. You had professionals helping you vet it, and you really fleshed out these characters so carefully.
Oh, that's nice. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, that's funny. My husband will come home now and I'm like, do you need any help? Like, is anything, maybe I have some experience in the field now. Maybe I can.
You've turned into a real giver, Aimee, haven't you? Helping him out. Well,
I'm very generous.
now you mentioned Brooklyn to the Berkshires just before the pandemic, a quieter, more outdoor life. But I was struck by Chestnut Hill, if I'm remembering the town
Yeah.
right, the setting of this book, which was pretty charming. Is that a real place? How did you settle on that? And the newspaper and the police, tell us how you fleshed that part out.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I actually based it on this town of Hudson, New York.
Oh, yes, a lot of publishing people live in Hudson.
Yeah, so it's, my idea was kind of this like gentrifying Hudson Valley town, that where there's like some tension between, I imagine, like the locals and the people who are settling there. And the police chief there actually was like wonderfully generous with me, where I emailed him and I was like, I'm writing a book. It's set in a town much like Hudson. Can I ask you some questions? And he was awesome. And so I probably had 5 different phone calls with him throughout the like 2 years I was working on it. And it was, I was like, so if say like a guy disappears, like a therapist, he goes missing, like where, like what would happen with this and what would you do? And he was always very nice about it. And I'm like, gosh, I really hope never happens in Hudson, New York. Like, because I feel like there's going to be like a knock on my door,
You've written the playbook for somebody to do bad things in Hudson or Chestnut Hill.
Oh, and I was like, I'm going to get arrested if anything happens. So I really hope that didn't, but yeah. So I had a lot of help with that.
So it did feel like a real place, just renamed.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't, because at the time when I wrote this, I was living in Brooklyn, and like you said, we've since moved, which wasn't even the plan when I was writing it. And so now it's funny because we are living in this kind of small New England town, and my husband is still a therapist, and with COVID, he's actually like working in the basement, like seeing people on Zoom, or he was up until recently. And like our house is this weird like post and beam house. So there's not a lot of like insulation between floors. So if I wanted to, I could actually hear into his sessions.
I want you to tell me there's a vent in the floor, and that
There is, weirdly, I would show you if it didn't mean like showing you how long it's been since I've swept, but like there's like actually this vent on the floor. So
well, I feel a sequel in the making. It's new stories
like,
down below.
I'm always like, I hope nobody, like none of his patients are watching, because I'm like, I promise I'm not listening. Like he's mostly teenage boys, and I'm like, I don't think I could like stomach that, like like listening to their experience of being at home with their parents during COVID for now a year. But yeah, it's kind of it's awkward.
What else I really liked about your book, I think there's a sense of humor that I'm feeling. I'm just meeting you tonight, but I feel like you're like a best friend already. You're fun and easy to be with. And there was some times that I actually laughed out loud. I'm remembering this day after day news about a hurricane like Sandy coming. And the neighbor comes over to Sam and says, did you hear there's a storm? And he says something like, well, I'm not Amish, which struck me so funny. Like, who wouldn't know? And there were funny names for his car. Tell us, you write humor well, which is not easy to do.
That's nice. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to, it was, I feel like at its core, it's a kind of a dark book. And so, I don't know, I think I love reading funny, like the experience of kind of being scared and then also laughing is really nice. And I mean, AJ Finn, who wrote The Woman in the Window, which is a great book, and it did incredibly, it's like a bestseller everywhere, and it's about to be a movie with Amy Adams. He blurbed the book. He blurbed Goodnight Beautiful. And in it, he said, it's not, he said something about how it might be like one of the funniest books you're going to read all year. And it was just like, that to me was one of the highest compliments. That's nice.
Like, yeah, I have a goofy personality, so that really tickled me too, that, the pages are turning quickly, but then you stop and you laugh, and it's just nice. a fun break. You know what else struck me? You talk about baseball a lot.
I don't know nothing about baseball.
You don't know a thing about baseball. I figured it was a secret passion of yours.
No, I feel like, a lot of this also at its core is kind of the relationship between boys and their fathers. Like Sam's relationship to his father was really instrumental. His father left on his 14th birthday to chase, a bathing suit model in the Talbot's catalog. And, it was this real like significant moment in Sam's life. And it sort of taught him that that's how you treat women. Like you just, you kind of are always chasing the next best thing. And then later in the book, there's another character and we talk about like their relationship with their father and stuff. And so to me, like baseball was like this very quintessential way that men have to connect with other men, sports in general. And so, and I did live in Baltimore for a while. So, and, was a little bit of an Orioles fan. So the Orioles is like the team that I write about there, which is kind of fun, bringing me back to my Baltimore days.
Oh, that is fun. You've woven a lot of actual threads of your life.
Yeah.
Yes, that's so cool. That is so cool. Hey, speaking of movies, I heard that they're talking about a movie for your
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. So The Perfect Mother was, the film rights were sold to TriStar and Kerry Washington. So I'm not sure yet what's going to happen with that. I mean, a lot of books are optioned and they don't all become movies. So you kind of are always just waiting to hear. And then I'm currently actually in the process of trying to adapt this Goodnight Beautiful into a screenplay, which is something that's totally new for me. And I've absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Like I'm Googling, like, how do you write a screenplay? Which I hope they're not listening to this because that's probably not what they want to hear, but yeah.
Thank God for the internet, right? I hope it catches on because you can teach,
Yeah.
I see my husband sharpening a chainsaw using the internet. Some things I'm not sure.
That's my next novel.
Well, Kerry Washington, that would be amazing. And I hope you get to be really involved. That would be such a special thing
It would be great. Yeah. So fingers crossed.
Fantastic. So what do I want to ask you next? Tell me about the whole writing process. Many of our readers, viewers that join our conversations with authors are writers, wannabe writers. And I'm hearing from a lot of my clients and friends. They've been very productive during the pandemic, but tell us about your life. Yeah.
I have not. I mean, I have
love,
to look. Yeah,
I have your honesty.
I have a first and second grader, and so that doesn't translate well to online school. And so now they're in a school that's open, thank goodness. And it's, this outdoor school. So, and we're in Western Massachusetts and it's like 30 degrees and they're still doing it. They're still outdoors. But, I mean, I think first it was having my kids at home. And then we were talking a little bit before we started, but just like, I cannot pull myself away from this crazy world that we're living in. And, it's hijacking everything. And I think part of it, my friends and I have a bunch of friends who are novelists, and it's such a good story of what's happening. Like if you can take away the death and the misery and the suffering and like how tragic it is, like not the pandemic necessarily, but just like, you're like, okay, so the president has, he is like telling people to go attack his vice president at the Capitol on television. And, it's like, that's hard to compete with. I can't really.
It's Shakespearean, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
And I tell my clients all the time, fiction has to make sense, but real life doesn't. And it feels like that a little bit now. Just this, you couldn't write this chaos.
No, you couldn't. And I think it's just like, I'm totally absorbed. Like every time I'm like, ooh, that, he's impeached the second time. Like that is a final twist that I would never have guessed that one, so I think that part of it is just being exhausted by the news and I think releasing a book during a pandemic has been like hard, and so it's all the joy of like, you work really hard and then you have this joyful release of a book. And for many authors that hasn't existed because it would be much more fun to be in person now instead of, like in your living room. So I think I'm just like, there's this, the book Wintering by Catherine May that came out recently. I mean, I just recommend that to everybody. And it's, it's about like, there are times of winter and not necessarily like the season, but just in people's own lives that are about like retreat and reflection, and that often follow like a hard time. And I think we're all in that right now. And so, I think for me, I'm just trying to be comfortable in this, like having no idea what's next and not being productive and just waiting, hopefully for the spring when, I'm praying things like just bloom in every possible way. So
That's well said. Yeah. Life is sort of renewed and refreshed and all
yeah.
that. Do you try to block off a certain amount of time a day, or you just,
I mean, the way that I write is like, I prefer to be writing. Like, it's harder for me to like interact with the real world than it is to be writing. So if you take away pandemics and like insurrections, like I'm like, like as soon as the kids are on the bus, like I'm sitting down and then I'm working until the minute they kind of walk in the door. So I can be really focused. And so now it's just like, no, I'm actually not doing that. I mean, I'm working on this screenplay, so I'm having to learn a whole new craft. And I'm kind of just doing it when I can. And it's been nice because I can get pretty obsessive about my stories and really, and my husband's like, oh, I'm sharing you all the time with like these two worlds. And so it's nice to kind of just like sit and, I'm just really waiting. I'm waiting for like, I got like nothing. I got no rules anymore with writing. Like,
I think you're smart. You finished a book and you're promoting it, and you're working on a screenplay. You're learning something new. You have 2 young children, a new home. You've got a lot going on.
that's like,
I see the wonderful Alice Knapp is telling people that wintering's available at the Ferguson Library
oh,
if they
wow.
want to check it out. So
Can I check it out? It's very hard to get.
it's very hard to get. Well, I think you have friends at the Ferguson, so we'll hook you up. That'd be great. That's so funny. So I hate to ask you, do you have a favorite of your 2 books, The Perfect Mother or this one, or do you love them for different reasons?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. It really does feel like your children. Like, The Perfect Mother was just it was such a crazy experience because I had been doing nonfiction for about 10 years, I think, at least, and I was a ghostwriter. And so, mostly like if you're somebody who has a story to tell, but you're not a writer, you would hire me and I would write your story and you would say that you wrote it, which is a weird thing that happens in publishing. But I always really wanted to write fiction, and so with The Perfect Mother, I just decided that I was going to give myself a year and just write a novel. And I was actually doing the same thing. Like I was Googling, how do you write a novel? But I was a big reader, so I sort of could put together like the arc of it. And so, but it ended up kind of, like I got my dream agent and then it went to auction and, I ended up with like my dream editor and then movie rights were sold and stuff. So it was just this thing that I never could have, it was beyond my wildest dreams. And then the second one was much harder to write because with The Perfect Mother, I was sure nobody was ever going to read it. And that was easier. And then I think once you have expectations, it makes it a less private experience of writing. Which is probably why I threw away a book before I, got to this one. But
Yeah.
I'm excited for my third because I think my third, I'm hoping I'll have both. Like it could be more private because I don't care as much anymore. So.
Well, you've had success and people are loving your books, so I think it takes some pressure off of.
Yeah. So it's like, before it's like people have to like this and it has to do well. And, and so I think it's nice to just kind of be like, the next book I'm hoping will be something I write more for me, whatever it is, whatever it's
Oh,
gonna be.
lovely. You're growing. I see a question coming in and it seems to fit right here, Aimee. How did you find your dream agent? Asked one of
That's
us.
a good question. So I mean, the process of getting an agent is, I'll talk specifically about fiction because it's a little bit different for nonfiction, but you have to write your entire novel before you can get an agent. And getting an agent is the first step for anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. You have to have an agent because publishers will not take submissions from authors. They only take submissions from agents. And so you write the most perfect version of a novel that you can. And so for many people, this is like a 4-year process, like you really have to have it be as great as possible. And then you query your agents. And the way that you would do it is you figure out who the agents are that represent the books that you love the most, or are most like the book that you want to write or that you've written. And then you write them a letter and all you have is a letter. And it says, here's who I am. Here's why I'm picking you. And here's what my book is. Would you like to read it? And so you've done all this work and you have a perfect, your most perfect version of your work. And you might never hear from that agent again, or you might, what you're hoping for is that an agent responds and says, yeah, send me the book or send me the first 50 pages. And so it's this long, grueling process, where you've worked really hard, but you still can't just like give people your book. You still have to be invited to send it. So, for me, it was just knowing like the agents who were that represented the books that I love, and then going through that process. And it's heart-wrenching because you get a lot of rejections. So
It's very hard. And you have one letter to show your writing talent and
Yeah.
your story and your plot and your dialogue and all of that in one letter. It's hard, but you did it. You landed. What was that day like when you finally
with
landed your
agent,
agent?
well, I mean, like this is a weird story to tell, but I like, if you kind of go in tiers of like, here's your dream agents, and then you go to your second tier and then your third tier. And like, I think I had 8 agents in my dream tier, and I ended up getting offers from all of them.
Oh, wow. That never happens. Wow.
Yeah. And so, I was in New York, and so I got to like meet people in person and have lunch and, kind of see like what the connection was and stuff. So I was really lucky in that respect. And I ended up with Elizabeth Weed, who's at the book group, and she's great. And it's her, and I actually don't know how many of them there are now, but at the time there were 4 women who came together and formed their own agency, and they've since expanded. And it was just knowing that like it connected on many different levels, like not just kind of who you think is going to get the biggest sale or, whatever it is, but it was just, somebody who you really can trust to shepherd your career long term. So yeah, it was
somebody that really cares about you and your work. That's great.
Yeah.
Do you take editing well?
You should ask my editor that. I think
maybe I'll make a phone call. Huh?
I do. I mean, I do actually, because I'm with Goodnight Beautiful less so, but for The Perfect Mother, I was part of a writing group, and we met every 2 weeks, and we were brutal. Like, you never really talked about like, here's what's good about what you've submitted this week. It's like, here's what the problems are. And it was the reason I finished the book, is because they just really help you kind of, take it apart and see the problems. And I just appreciate that so much. And, and I had written a lot of books because I had been writing nonfiction. And so I sort of was used to it. But it was funny. I remember when I did a little bit of magazine writing a long time ago, 20 years. And I remember the first magazine piece I sold, I got the edits back, and I kind of knew the editor. We were friendly, and we went out to lunch, and I was like, go through every single edit and tell me why you're changing this. And he was like, no, like, he's like, this is not how this works. Like, you're just going to take the changes. And I was like, I can't believe this. I was so offended. But now I welcome it, because I don't think that, every edit has made my books so much better.
I think that's true. And most editors I've worked with are really excellent, and they care deeply about the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what, Aimee, I absolutely love this cover.
Oh.
Yeah. It's an interesting texture too.
Yeah.
So tell us, were you very involved in this process? Did you have feedback, or did they just hit upon it?
Yeah, I mean, so I met Harper, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, and they're really wonderfully collaborative. And we had this, there's moths in the book. They're not like a huge like theme, but there's moths that sort of appear in this old house. And so we were playing with this moth idea, and then this is all my poor husband, but we have this weird screen door, or not weird, but it's a screen door. And one night there was this huge moth on the screen, and he was inside the house, and the moth was on the screen on the outside of the house. And I took a picture, and it was just this moth with like this creepy guy's face. No offense to my husband, because he's quite handsome, but like in the picture he looked creepy. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want this to be the cover of my books. And so I like sent it to everybody, and I was like, can we just make this into the cover, like this man in the background, like of this, with this moth and stuff. And they wouldn't let me do that, but it did eventually sort of morph into this. So yeah, but I love it.
I must say, I thought it was a butterfly. It's so beautiful, but the big moth, yeah, lovely. Fantastic. So do you ever think about writing nonfiction again, or are you firmly in the fiction camp now?
I don't know. I would do it again. I mean, my nonfiction was really narrative. So, for mostly. And so I think that I do have some ideas that at the, that are kind of in there that I would like to do. But a lot of my work was led me to travel to the developing world. Like, I wrote this book called However Long the Night, which is a biography of a woman named Molly Melching, who's working in Senegal. And she's an educator, and she she basically built schools in rural Senegal for women and children who don't typically go to school. And what ended up happening, she had this curriculum that was about human rights and women's rights. And what ended up happening through these schools is that women started to declare an end to the practice of female genital cutting, which is very prominent there. And so the schools spread, and so did this movement. And like, I mean, to date, I don't even know what they're up to now, but the number of communities that where women have stood up and declared an end to the practice. And so the book was a lot about, was about her and the movement, and it was a lot of travel to these small places. And then I wrote a book about a woman named Pam Coke who was working in Ghana to rescue kids who had been sold into slavery. And so my nonfiction work is like, that's my focus. It has been. And so, I think when this is all over with and we can travel again, and if we ever return to normal, I do have
we will.
Yeah, I hope so. We will.
We will.
I hope so.
Yeah. So you'll travel again. Well, those two books you just talked about, they sound like life-changing books, like powerful narrative stories. And I bet with your writing skills, they read almost like fiction.
That's nice. I mean, this book that I co-wrote with this woman, Pam Cope, it's called Jansen's Gift, Jantsens. I mean, it did not do well. It's one of those books that I feel like it's such a good book, but it just didn't, for whatever reasons, books don't do well. But I always am hoping that one will have a second life. Like, it's Pam's memoir. It's written in her voice and it's her story. And her son died unexpectedly when he was 15. And she ended up using the money she raised for like a memorial fund, like $20,000, that just led her down this path that eventually led her to Ghana, West Africa, where she is working to like rescue these kids who've been sold into slavery, like some as young as 5. And her story is phenomenal, and she's hilarious, and she's just like so real. And so I'm always like trying to plug that book that came out in like 2009 or something, but maybe you guys could have it at the library.
As we say in publishing, it's a new book if you haven't read it. So, maybe some people out there will pick it up. Tell us the title again.
Jansen's Gift.
Jansen's Gift. Okay, yeah. Fantastic. That sounds like a great read. So now where will you travel to when the world is back to normal? Have you thoughts about that?
No, I mean, we talk about this a lot, and I don't know. I mean, I really am itching to go to a city because we're living in a pretty rural community right now. And so just anywhere where I could like go and like eat a ton of food and, sit outside at a sidewalk cafe and my husband and I, yeah, we love
tall buildings.
America, so we're like, should we like maybe, somewhere like that? And I don't know, but it'll be nice to be able to do that.
Fantastic. Now, your books have been made into audios.
Yeah.
Not yet. Yeah. And were you involved in that process? Because we find, nope, they just did them. Okay. Have you listened to your own audios? Or?
I mean, I didn't to The Perfect Mother. I couldn't. And then for Goodnight Beautiful, I have to say this, like, you should listen to this book on audio because it is so good. And I don't really like audiobooks. So like, I wouldn't even listen to my own, but I had this long drive maybe 2 months ago. And so I listened to it, and there's this I mean, they're all great. It's 3 narrators, but there's this one guy named Joel Fromkin, and it's like so genius what he does. I rarely write fan letters, and I don't know it. Like, I'm not involved at all. Like, I get to hear clips first and, say like, this person sounds good, this person sounds good. But I trust the editor who's in charge of the audiobooks to know who the best people are. And he's brilliant. So I was like, now I'm just trying to find like anything that he's narrated. I'm listening to because he's so good at it.
When you listen to the audio, was there anything about the book you wish you had changed? I mean, it's kind of a different sensory experience.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think I'm having that experience now, trying to adapt this into a screenplay, which is, it's the hardest part of this, because I'm like, oh wait, I should have done this, because I'm so back in the lives, and I'm, normally when you write a book, you publish it. And I never read my books again once they're published. And I kind of just like move on. And I think a lot of people are just like, okay, like that was that. And now it's in the reader's hands. But yeah, so being inside the screenplay, I'm just like, oh, I'm kind of like, oh no, this is a big mistake here. So it's hard not to be critical because you're back in it.
Oh, I imagine. I often think when I look back at anything like weeks later, did I really write that? Or, I wish I'd said this differently or that kind
Yeah.
of thing for sure. Yeah. Now, when you plot your novels, do you do like this whole paper map of the arc of your book? Tell us how you do that work.
I mean, I try to. I mean, I obviously I'm not that good at it, or I wouldn't have like thrown away an entire book. But yeah, I mean, I try to. But it's just, I feel like it's not. It's. I don't know anybody who writes like in a binary way like this. Like I have this. Even if you do a really detailed outline, like it's going to change because as you write and as you get to know your characters, they're going to do stuff that surprise you or like wasn't what you planned, and you're just going to have to then shift, and so I think it's like you're always writing into the unknown even if you think that you have the best outline in the world. So I do. I mean, I have a friend who just sits down and writes, and like that I kind of want to try it because I think that would be interesting to see where that goes. But because my books are so kind of like intricately plotted, it takes I have to have it's a puzzle that I have to have some idea of before I start.
Oh, absolutely. And you have the alternating voices. And I found just as a reader, sometimes I had to stop and think, oh, who's speaking right now? It's
Yeah.
switched. And how the heck did she do that? Because my brain hurt and you had to write it. I just
My
had to
brain
read
hurt.
it. My
Yeah.
brain hurt. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
clever. Yeah.
Yeah, this book
Fantastic.
kind of broke my brain a little bit because it's like there's these characters and you're like, wait, what does this character know? It's Sam and Annie. So it's like, what does Sam know? What does Annie know? What's true? And like, what does the writer think? So, I mean, the reader. So you're kind of like having to hold all that in your head or somewhere in a notebook. And, and I have a lot of early readers who help me and, will read it and tell me like, you screwed up here. Like, this is giving something away. And so,
That's really interesting. Now I have a challenge that just came in from one of our people in our audience. You ready?
yeah.
They asked for your elevator pitch on this book.
And
I, as a literary agent, I have to do this all the time. It's hard. So you have a couple sentences to tell this book.
Yeah, so it's about Sam and Annie, who are newlyweds. They got married after knowing each other just a couple months. They leave New York and move to a sleepy, town in upstate New York to take care of his mother, who's suffering from dementia. He's a therapist. He opens a home office. Annie is a bored housewife who doesn't know what's next for her. And in the ceiling, it's discovered there's a vent through which you can hear every single word of Sam's sessions with his patients, many of whom are these, attractive, lonely women of Chestnut Hill, New York. And so the question becomes like, would you listen? And in this case, the answer is yes. And then one day, like the cute young patient shows up, and it seems like there's something between Sam and she, and then, Sam goes missing. And so the book then becomes about where did he go? And he has a reputation of being a heartbreaker in high school. And so everybody sort of has decided that he's just left Annie. And so, the book sort of becomes about that.
Like his father had left his mother. It's sort of the pattern of life.
Yeah, exactly.
The cycle. And at the core, there's kind of a financial twist too. Do you know anybody? Oh, somebody just said, sounds super, a must read. So I guess they liked your elevator pitch. Well done.
A long elevator ride.
It worked. So what do you think about the financial thing? Do you know somebody that went through that kind of a scenario, or was that just your own inspiration?
Yeah, no, it's, so Sam is, he's expecting a lot of money from his father who has sort of divorced the woman that he left his family for, who was very rich. She's a Tupperware heiress. And so he's been promised I can't remember how much it is, a lot of money from his father. And so he sort of makes these decisions like buying a big house, and like this big renovation and a nice Lexus, in the knowing that this money is coming imminently as soon as his mother is with it enough to sign the money over to him. And so, I don't know, I feel like I'm giving away too much, but things don't work out the way he thinks that they work out. And so, I think it's just another way of kind of, in the first third of the book, Sam kind of has this dream that he's gonna be a different guy. He's not who the people in the town think he is. You know, he's not his father. He's not who he was in high school. He's reformed and he's in love with his wife, and he's going to do everything he can to, you know, make sure that she doesn't regret marrying him. But then he's faced with all of these different roadblocks, and one of them is being, you know, the financial situation is more dire than he had thought it was going to be.
Proving the old adage, don't spend money until you have it, I guess, is the takeaway from
Exactly.
that scenario. And the wife has a whole family in France, I guess. That was an interesting story too. It allowed you to talk about sort of an overseas location. That almost felt like it could be a whole new novel over there.
Okay.
But
That's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, that's so Annie, his wife, she, you know, she was orphaned at 17 when her parents died in a helicopter crash. And, you know, so the people she's closest are her aunt and uncle and a cousin who live in France. And yeah, I mean, I know I wrote her, so this is weird to say, but I just really love her. Like Annie is, you know, she's like a hard ass, and she's independent, and she's very confident, and she's confident in herself and in her sexuality and her husband's feelings about her. And, you know, in some ways that makes her suspicious after he goes missing, because we don't expect women to be like that. You know, we kind of expect them to kind of become a puddle, and she doesn't really become a puddle, you know, because that's not who she is. So
she's a great character, and she's a professor, and she's smart, but she's also so clever, and she feels like somebody that's trying to keep her marriage fun and lively. And I mean, even though they're newlyweds, she's got a lot of interesting twists. Question coming in about what's your favorite part about the writing process?
Oh, nothing.
You're too honest, Aimee.
I mean, if anybody says they like the process, they're lying. No, I mean, I think that when you finish a first draft, and it could be, as you know, Annie Lamott says, like, talks about the shitty first draft, like you just got to get it down, and it's going to be really bad, but you have to get to that full first draft. Like that I love it. I really do. Cause you have it, you have your story. And then what's left, I think, is the fun part where you get to fix it and, you know, fix all the problems and go much deeper into the characters. But I think the story and the plotting is very difficult, you know, for everybody. For Stephen King, I'm sure. Like, it's just a hard thing to create a whole world in your head. And so it doesn't matter how bad your first draft is, like just getting to it. It doesn't even have to be full sentences, like just getting the story down, I think, is such a huge accomplishment. And then the fun sort of can begin.
Starts to feel real when you have it down.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking before and I jumped over it, and I think this would be really interesting to people about your sort of writers group in Brooklyn for the first book, because this might be a technique for some of our viewers today. Did you put the group together, and did you have strict deadlines? How did you were you like deadline buddies? How did it work?
Yeah, I didn't put the group together. They had actually been around for years, and it was, what were there, 5 of us, I think, 5 or 6 of us. And it was, not everybody was a novelist. Like some people were doing essays or nonfiction, but it was, I mean, this is the thing I say to everybody when they're like, what do you need to do? I'm like, you need to get into a writer's group, like either start one or join one. And it has to be something that people take really seriously. Like, it's not a book club where you kind of drink wine and only talk about the book for like 5 minutes, which I also love. But, you know, it's like, it's serious, and you know, everybody has their own rules. And I've been in, I mean, I did a similar one, but, you know, if it's like your rules. How often can you submit? And how many days before the meeting do you have to get it in? And, you know, the reason it kind of dissolved in the end, because people were not like reading it closely enough. And, you know, but to me, it felt like you have to take it very, very seriously. And, you know, people hold you accountable. And so when you say you're going to submit, you do. And nobody had to submit, like it wasn't a forced thing. So I just think it's the best in the world. Like,
did you come to value their opinions?
Yes.
And develop a tough skin? I think that's part of it.
I remember I would always like the nights after a writing group, like my husband would just be like afraid to come home because I would just be like, or like, they don't want me to succeed. Like everybody hates me, like, and everybody who submitted was feeling the same thing. Like, I hate this group. I'm never coming back. And then the next day you're like, yeah, they were right about everything. So it's like, it was really hard because it's super honest. It's like, no, this is terrible. Like this whole thing, like get rid of this character. But I never would have written The Perfect Mother, like my debut, if I didn't have that support. And now I have a different thing where I just have, it's actually all the people in my group now we don't live near each other, so we can't get together. But so I have like 3 friends that I send my work to kind of separately, and, and can really just get into it with them and all that. So, that's the version I have of it now.
That's excellent. And they're trusted readers.
Yeah,
And,
very trusted.
plus you've got a couple books under your belt. It's sort of different, but I think I encourage people that are new to try to put together a little brainstorming or a group to help you process. And I know we have a lot of tools at the library too, for people that want to write. So
that's great.
And share with us some of your favorite writers, because we're all looking for inspiration during the pandemic.
What am I reading right now? It's funny. I'm actually writing a little column for my local newspaper. I'm recommending books. So that's been kind of fun. I'm going through a big Sally Rooney phase, who wrote Normal People.
Great, right?
Yeah, she's great. And that's something, a Hulu or Netflix or something series now, but I love her work. I just read Lily King's Writers and Lovers. Did you read this?
I've not read that, no.
Okay, that should be your next book.
Okay, making a note, turning my head away for a minute.
And it's that book where, I mean, when I first heard about it, I was like, I'm not reading that. It was, it's like the character is this 31-year-old single woman who's living in Boston, waiting tables, trying to write a novel, and like deciding between 2 men. And you're like, yawn, like that sounds like a book for millennials. And it's so good. Like, it's Lily King, who I hadn't read her before. She had written Euphoria. And it was my favorite book of last year. And so my friend just gave me the book Saint X.
Oh, I haven't read that either. Yeah.
Which is this very atmospheric. It's about a girl who goes missing while on vacation in a Caribbean island with her parents. And, it's very
a Natalie Holloway kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, it's very atmospheric and, elevated. It's very cerebral. And, my next one is Underground Railroad by Coulson Whitehead, which for some reason I haven't read yet.
That's fabulous. Yep, that's wonderful. And I know we have that at the library too, so that's a good one.
Yeah, our library is not open for browsing yet, so I'm like, it's painful. And actually, can I plug? Do you know the Dory Phasmagory series for little kids, for early readers?
I don't know it, but plug away, because this is for readers and writers.
I mean, the librarians probably know it, but so I have a 2nd grader who is slowly becoming like a not reluctant reader. And I had 2 friends recommend these books the same week, Dory Phantasmagory. And she's the youngest of 3 siblings. And I don't know I don't think they ever say how old she is, but she's probably like 6. And she's the best character that I have read, like, including adult fiction, in years. There's 5 books, and my daughter read them in like 3 days. And I so highly recommend them if you have little kids.
Grandkids, I do. So, that's a good suggestion.
You can, like, I don't love reading these books like at night. Like most of them, just like, oh. But this is a book where I was like, my husband and I were like fighting over who got to put the 2nd grader to bed so that we can like read along these books.
Well, that's high praise. Huh?
Yeah, it's really good.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad to hear you're raising readers. That's such a challenge. And I know for every baby shower I go to, I give them a box of books, and kind of like what the library does with the baby book program.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Books on raising readers, because I think it takes a village to keep kids reading.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we have a couple years yet before I have to give in and get their phones. So I'm just trying to get them into like reading books before then.
Well, I think your children are going to be naturals. I just have a feeling that with a best-selling author in the house. Yep. Does your husband contribute to your plot lines at all?
He's actually really helpful. We have he has off on Fridays, and so we have this we've just started this. My kids are just back to school for a couple of weeks now, but where we just spend Fridays with a screenplay, which is what I'm working on now, where we just kind of like make a really nice lunch and it's creative day, we call it. And I'll be like, here's what I'm working on. And he's really good. He's a therapist and he's actually not a big reader, which is funny, but he's good at helping me kind of see the stories.
It's like an LA movie studio. I saw a question come in and then it disappeared. Something about, could that question come back up?
Oh, here I see it. Does the role playing between Annie and Sam lead to his discovery?
Okay.
Oh, I can't tell you that. Trying to figure out the reason this was such an important segment of the plot. Keep reading. That's all I can say. So Sam and Annie have this role playing thing that they do, which is like the sexy newlywed thing that they sort of pretend they're other characters as part of their enjoyment of each other. And so the question is like, does that eventually like matter? And so all I can say is keep reading the book.
I think, yes, it's fun to read and it's pivotal to the plot for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we only have a couple more minutes. I'm looking for other questions from people. Amy's happy to talk about the books or the writing process or writing a screenplay, which she's now going to be an expert on soon.
I hope so. That would be nice. Once I finish Googling it.
Somebody's asking, we talked about this a little bit before, do you block off a time every day? And I know.
I basically write as long as the kids are in school. Those are my hours. And I'm trying to be better about it. Again, like pandemic, this is like pre-pandemic world, because post-pandemic world, everything is different. But pre-pandemic world, like I will work the entire 8 hours or something that I have. And I just get so like, I think I have to, for me to hold it all, I have to kind of go fully into it. So one of my goals for this year, when I am ready to start my next novel is to not work like so obsessively and to try and do other things, and walk more. I'm definitely doing that with the screenplay, is like trying to move a little bit more to get my brain working and all that. So, my ideal day would be like the kids go to school at 8. I'm sitting down by 8:15. I have my like 15,000 cups of coffee waiting for me. And then I work until 1 and then do something else, which I think would be like a really happy life, which I'm going to work towards.
Sounds really balanced. Somebody asked, they thought they heard you say you're reading The Normal People.
Yeah. Normal People. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Normal People. Yeah. By Sally Rooney, which again is some sort of, I haven't seen it, but it's a TV series now too. But it's a beautiful book. It's not much happens. So it's the opposite of my books. But she's younger, which is probably annoying to even have to point that out. But which I only point out because she's just so wise and such a beautiful writer. She's probably in her late 20s. But I highly recommend her books for like the language and the prose.
Yeah, the question, thank you for that. People reading less? I don't find that at all, but what's your thoughts on that?
I don't know. What do you think? You think people are reading? I'm reading less.
Book sales are actually up, but I think we've seen some shifts in categories. I know like puzzle books and cookbooks have sold really well. My sense is the attention span has been hurt by the news and the pandemic. But I think people are still buying books, and I think we'll come back to be a reading culture.
I hope so. I do think the attention span thing is interesting because I worry that that's more of like that's a result of our phones and without the craziness, and I think right now today was having this conversation and somebody was like, what do you think will make a successful book after all this? And they were talking subject wise, but I said like a kind of short book. Like I would say that books that are 200 to 250 pages, maybe it might become more popular which is why the books that I'm reading now, I find like, I like them. I feel accomplished when I actually finish something now.
I hear that all the time. And on the contracts I'm doing with publishers, the word count has come down a lot.
Oh, really? Interesting.
So they're finding that as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I thought your book was just the right size, a couple of good sittings and you just couldn't wait to get back to it. It felt.
And it is a short book. I think it's, at least 50 pages shorter than my debut. And I was worried about that in the beginning. And I think, it's actually been to my benefit.
This has been, I want to be really mindful of your time, and you've been so wonderful to have us. Last call for any questions. I think we've gotten them all, but I'm so grateful that you joined us. It's been really fun. I do feel like you're a new friend, another
Good.
Irish Catholic girl. And Elm Street Bookstore in New Canaan sells the books, and the library's open. We hope people come and see us. Oh, there's the contact information for Elm Street Books. And one promise from you with your next book, will you come back and
I
spend
will.
more time with the Stanford group here?
I would love to do that. And I'm kind of thinking Elm Street Books is not, New Canaan is not that far from me, actually. So I
But-
should go and sign some books for them or something.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Aimee, thank you so much again. It's been really, really fun to have you. And I
Thank
look
you so
forward
much.
to your screenplay and
Yeah.
the movie and all good things for you in the future.
Thank
You
you,
stay
Marilyn, you
safe.
too. And
Bye-bye
thank you so
now.
much for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, our pleasure. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye, Alice.
Nice to meet everyone. Bye.